Okay, so we're going to talk today about social emotional development. That's what all of the pyramid is based on. So really understanding and that the base of the pyramid is really that supporting the social emotional competence. So as we move up, we'll talk about the other parts of the pyramid, but really that foundation is around that supporting the social emotional competence. So here's the definition that we'll be working off of today for social emotional development. Social development is composed of the behaviors, attitude, and effects integral to a child's interaction with adults and peers. And so pretty familiar with that in all of the work we do. So, but that's our working definition for today. So really talking about, there's some challenges as we know and we run into in our work of defining social emotional development as compared to defining like gross motor skills and language development. Social emotional is a little more difficult to define, and that's because, as we know, a lot of our emotional behavior is internal. We do see students acting out, but still understanding what the antecedent of that, and that comes into the variability that we see. Social emotional behavior does not occur in a vacuum. And then, of course, we have the family and cultural attributes, which in our district, in our work, we see that in a lot of cases has a huge impact. A lot of our kids have experienced trauma and, maybe moved here to this country and just some different things, homelessness. And so there's a lot of factors, as we know in our work every day, that really impact this social emotional learning. So this slide here, you're going to also reference handout 4.1. So within social emotional development, we want to talk about that we are developing the capacity to form close and secure adult and peer relationships, experience, regulate, and express emotions in socially and culturally appropriate ways, explore the environment and learn trust, self-awareness, autonomy, all in the context of family, community, and culture. So this comes from sess4, and this is really, thinking about even birth through age 3. This is where we want kids to begin to develop. And so when we think about that, and then we think about the context of some of our work, even with our little folks as they transition up to kindergarten, a lot of them haven't developed these social emotional skills yet.
I also see sometimes with the teachers, and I wonder if maybe they haven't developed them fully either, because of some of the ways they expect the children to represent these things.
Right. Yeah, and there's a lot also maybe with parents as well. So yeah, you're right, the adults and the teachers and the parents, and so that'll come out later as we work through some things, just thinking about ourselves as adults and providers, and then how our teachers are, and then some things we can do to also work with parents, which I think sometimes, especially in our setting, we don't always do effectively.
Yeah, because I think that, we were just doing a PD for our schools talking about bias in education and bias in how we write our IEP, so I just wonder how much of bias is in that when we're identifying kids that early.
Right. No, I think you bring up a really valid point. And I don't know, the rest of you feeling like you see that also in your work?
The bias piece? Or
Yeah. Yeah, and so the handout I referenced is just the sess4 definition and some additional handouts of social emotional development. And I think you're right, Audrey, even and that's a huge piece of all of the sessions that we go through in Pyramid Plus approach, is really that adult piece and working with the adults in this process. So while we teach the students, we also have to teach the adults. So, yep, great point. So we want to talk about the correlation of temperament and attachment. So it's important to really think about that emotional regulation is critical to developing healthy and satisfying and acceptable social emotional behavior. And I think at least I can say for myself, I see that a lot in, students we work with, that emotional regulation is something that is not always, they don't always have the skills to be able to do that. When we talk about temperament, we can think about that it can affect attachment either in a positive or negative way, depending on the temperament match between, and in this case we're talking about infants and toddlers, but our students even in preschool, so depending on the temperament of the child and the adult, if they clash, so it's built in on either side, and so as we know that it's up to the adult to make the adjustments in those situations so that they can get along with the child.
The other thing I think about with this is a lot of our kids, even though they may be older than a toddler, they're functioning at that level. Their development's at that point, not even just like kids with cognitive disabilities, kids from trauma backgrounds, and so a lot of this stuff is very relevant for our grade school kids because they're oftentimes in that 2, 3, 4-year-old stage of development with emotional regulation and executive functioning.
Yeah, that's a great point. And just one of the other reasons why I feel like even for us at this public school setting, that this work is so important in our help. And not that we as a group aren't understanding that, but it's nice reminders, and then we have the tools to help support others in the school. So, temperament appears to be, through all the research, biologically based. It remains fairly consistent over time, and it affects a child's reaction to other people and the environment. And so, even for those of us that are parents, we can think about, our own children and their temperament and what we see, as they grow. It remains pretty consistent over time. So really temperament is genetically determined and becomes very obvious right away in infants. So attachment is a pattern of interaction that develops over time as the children and the caregivers engage and interact. So caregivers can be parents, teachers, nannies, babysitters, daycare providers. All of those pieces really impact the child's social emotional development and the attachment and temperament. So let's see if these will play. Anyway, so there are 3 temperament types. So the 3 types are fearful, feisty, and flexible. Or flexible, fearful, and feisty. So either way. And so they really have changed this to more easily define. It used to be that they kind of talked about that a child was easy, slow to warm, and difficult. And those were kind of hard to really quantify what's happening. And so they have changed it to these 3 types of temperament.
I like feisty better than difficult. It doesn't have such a negative connotation.
Right. Yeah.
I think kids can go vastly through all 3 of those
I'm thinking that
different
too.
environmental conditions. So just because you may have a child that's in one stage longer than the other, I think they see them vastly between all 3.
And the volume on my computer must be you can imagine. That's a laugh and that's a cry. And then so within each of these three types, then we have traits. So you have temperament traits. So activity level. So always active to generally still. Biological rhythms, predictability of hunger, sleep, and elimination. Approach and withdrawal, so how the child responds to new situations. Mood, the tendency to react with positive or negative mood, whether they're attentive, happy, serious, or fussy. Intensity of reactions, so energy or strength of the emotional reaction.
I'm a very intensely reactive child.
Yeah.
He's flexible, but intense.
So some more of the traits continued. So the sensitivity, so what is their comfort levels of sensory integration, or information? So how do they respond to sound, brightness of light, feel of clothing, new tastes, adaptability, ease of managing transition or changes, distractibility, how easily a child's attention is pulled away from an activity, and persistence, how long they continue an activity that they feel is difficult. And so, you know, you can see when you look at these, then how we can start thinking about if a child might have a disability. So when I read through these, I think about, in particular, autism, which is identified early on, you know, by age 3, for a lot of kids, 3 to 4. And so the temperament traits really play into part of that. So any questions about those? All right, so we're gonna watch a little video on flexible, fearful, and feisty. Turn up my volume firstly. And so as we watch this is a video from the California Department of Education, and it really is designed to demonstrate the three types of temperaments. So as you watch it, think about either your own children you've interacted with, and we'll kind of do a debrief. I know, I have to fix that. I don't know why. We get the video going here. And then hopefully we have sound. No. There's no